The desert just south of Dubai has always offered an illusion of perfect security. For over 2 decades, Minhad Air Base was the quiet, untouchable nerve center for Western military operations in the Middle East. It was the hub where American, British, and Australian forces coordinated logistics, surveillance, and transit. Shielded by the immense wealth and heavily fortified air defenses of the United Arab Emirates, Minhad was considered a sanctuary, until March of 2026. To understand the attack that nobody saw coming, and how it completely rewrote the modern rules of engagement, we have to look at the spark that ignited the sky. Late February 2026 marked a geopolitical earthquake. Coordinated United States and Israeli strikes penetrated deep into Iranian territory. The objective was absolute, and the result was historic: the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, alongside several senior officials. The world held its breath, waiting for the retaliation. Intelligence agencies knew Iran would strike back. They anticipated proxy attacks. They anticipated cyber warfare. They even anticipated direct missile launches against Israel. But what they severely underestimated was the sheer scale of the swarm and the willingness of Tehran to directly bombard the sovereign nations of the Persian Gulf. Iran did not just strike back. They unleashed a tidal wave of unmanned aerial vehicles and ballistic missiles. In the first week of March alone, the UAE Defense Ministry tracked nearly 1,700 drones and missiles aimed at their nation. The target list was unprecedented. Iran was no longer fighting in the shadows. They were going after the very foundation of the U.S. and allied military presence in the region. And right at the top of that list was Minhad. Imagine the scene. It is the dead of night. The neon glow of Dubai sits just 24 kilometers to the north. Inside Minhad, hundreds of foreign troops, including a core contingent of the Australian Defence Force that had called this base home since 2003, are asleep in their quarters. Then, the early warning radars light up. Not with one contact or two, but with dozens. On Monday, March 2nd, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps initiated what they called a decisive and targeted operation. They launched 26 drones and 5 ballistic missiles across the Gulf. Their targets were spread out: Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, and the U.S. Command and Control Center at Minhad. The sky above the Emirates turned into a chaotic battleground. Emirati air defenses, utilizing Patriot missile batteries and advanced interception systems, worked frantically to knock the incoming projectiles out of the sky. Sirens wailed across Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Debris rained down on populated areas, starting fires and shattering the peaceful facade of the wealthy Gulf state. At Minhad, the sheer volume of the attack tested the limits of modern air defense. The IRGC claimed to have directed 6 drones and 5 ballistic missiles specifically at the base. While the exact interception rates remained classified, the reality on the ground was terrifying. Drones managed to penetrate the defensive net. The base was struck on that very first night of the conflict. It was an attack that shattered a decades-old paradigm. Iran had directly targeted a multinational military installation on Emirati soil. The strike proved that geographic distance and advanced defense networks were no longer a guarantee of safety. The era of the unstoppable drone swarm had arrived, but the assault on Minhad was not a one-off event. It was the beginning of a sustained campaign of attrition. Fast forward 2 weeks. The conflict has spiraled. The region is effectively a war zone. Commercial airspace is severely restricted, leaving over 100,000 foreign nationals trapped in the Middle East due to flight suspensions. Daily interceptions are the new normal. And Iran is bleeding out its vast arsenal of Shahed-type drones and ballistic missiles. On Wednesday, March 18th, at approximately 9:15 inches the morning Australian Eastern Daylight Time, the sirens at Minhad screamed again. This time, a projectile, whether a drone or a missile, remains heavily debated by defense analysts, slammed into a road leading directly up to the base. The impact triggered a massive explosion, sending a shockwave through the complex. The resulting fire rapidly spread, engulfing parts of the Australian section of the base. Inside, troops scrambled. The blaze tore through an accommodation block and severely damaged a medical facility. The smoke billowing into the desert sky was a stark visual representation of the vulnerability of Western forces in the region. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese soon appeared before the press, delivering a statement that was both a relief and a grave warning. He confirmed that while the military housing and medical units were damaged, miraculously, no Australian, British, or American personnel were killed or injured. The troops had reached the bunkers in time, but when asked if Al-Minhad was being deliberately singled out, Albanese's response highlighted the chaotic nature of the new war. The Iranian regime, he stated, is engaging in random attacks right across the region. It wasn't just Al-Minhad. French Rafale jets were scrambling to defend Camp de la Paix in Abu Dhabi. Satellite imagery from Planet Labs revealed that buildings at the U.S. Navy's massive Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain had been completely leveled. Drones were hitting oil fields, disrupting operations at Jebel Ali port, and forcing the evacuation of Dubai International Airport. The strikes on Al-Minhad Air Base represent a fundamental pivot in modern military history. For years, the unwritten rules of engagement in the Middle East dictated that state-on-state violence was carefully calibrated. Iran utilized proxy militias in Yemen, Iraq, and Lebanon to maintain plausible deniability. The U.S. and its allies relied on surgical strikes and economic sanctions. March 2026 obliterated that playbook by launching hundreds of drones directly from Iranian territory into the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain. Tehran sent a clear, undeniable message. If the Iranian leadership is targeted, the entire architecture of Western military power in the Gulf is fair game. This is the terror of the modern drone swarm. A Shahed drone costs a fraction of the price of the surface-to-air missile required to shoot it down. By launching them in waves of dozens or hundreds, intermixed with high-speed ballistic missiles, an attacker doesn't need to evade the defense system. They simply need to exhaust it. Al-Minhad was defended by some of the most sophisticated anti-aircraft technology on the planet. Yet, the base was hit twice in 2 weeks. Facilities burned. Operations were disrupted. The psychological impact on the troops stationed there, knowing that at any moment a GPS-guided explosive could fall from the sky, is immeasurable. For military planners in Washington, London, and Canberra, the Al-Minhad strikes forced an immediate and uncomfortable reckoning. The concept of a safe rear echelon in the Middle East no longer exists. Every logistics hub, every refueling station, every barracks is now on the front line. In response, nations have had to rapidly adapt. Australia deployed its advanced E-7, a wedge-tail surveillance aircraft, to the Gulf to act as an eye in the sky, desperate to provide earlier warnings for the troops on the ground. Base perimeters are being hardened. But the reality remains: defense is infinitely more expensive and infinitely more difficult than offense. As the fires at the Al-Minhad accommodation blocks were extinguished, the ashes left behind marked the end of an era. The base remains operational, a vital artery for the troops still stationed in the region. But the atmosphere has permanently shifted. The attack nobody saw coming wasn't invisible. It was just inconceivable to a military establishment that had grown accustomed to unquestioned air superiority. Iran's willingness to cross the threshold into mass, direct bombardment of Allied bases has drawn a new line in the sand. The strikes on Al-Minhad proved that modern warfare has been democratized by the drone. You no longer need a trillion-dollar air force to strike a superpower's military base. You just need enough drones, enough missiles, and the ruthless calculus to use them all at once. The rules of engagement have changed forever. And as the conflict in the Middle East continues to unfold, the troops at Al-Minhad and at every other base across the region sleep with one eye open, listening for the sound of the sirens, waiting for the next swarm to arrive.